Häxan Sabaoth is the sixth full-length album from Unaussprechlichen Kulten, a Santiago, Chile-based death metal band, a quartet from what I remember, and one that's been around for a fair number of years. They formed back in about 1999, and they're very much in the tradition, or they were in tradition of kind of incantation-esque atmosphere at the time, but really they were more about brutality early on. So I feel like their early records could have had some Deeds of Flesh influence, maybe some of the just American scene in general. I think I chalked it up to something like Chrysian at the time, back in the day. And they were just different guitarists on different albums early on. So their themes have been pretty consistent, but their style changed depending on the mode of the band, and their interest took a turn towards maybe more of a technical style back in 2010. You can kind of see that change happen when they strip their lineup back to a duo and they take on more of a technical, almost immolation-esque affect to it for a split with After Death, which was Nocturnus AD before it was renamed. And that's kind of when I got into gear and like went back through all their discography and became a fan. This is one of the more interesting Chilean death metal bands in this style because they've done something different with each record. They've always moved forward. They've always done something different with each record, one after another. And you like, as is the case with this one, I couldn't really have predicted where they would go with it next. So we'll get a sense of that by just jumping into a song right now, just so you can get right to into the thick of it there. So if you are already a fan of the band, you know that around 2014 that record came out. It introduced a clangorous, intense, technical death metal style that was also atmospheric and again rooted in kind of the what I would consider the unholy cult school of dissonance, where it wasn't so much a random collage of notes as it was a veering, strange. Walk through an idea that was also dissonant and phrased in a certain way that was eerie and hard to follow. So that's my way of explaining the next two records, because as we get up to Teufelsbucher and we find them getting even more raw with their guitar sound, getting a little bit more dissonant and angular with their style, and definitely moving in a direction that was just more challenging and aggressive over time. And it was one of the more interesting evolutions of a band in this style and in their area, because there wasn't much else that sounded like it, and there weren't a lot of bands that could do what they were doing. We can chalk this up to the guitar style of Joseph Kerwin, the kind of main guitarist of the band, and well, I was expecting an even more harsh record with Häxan Sabaoth, and that's not the case. To get to the point here, finally, this is maybe both a little bit more of a remembrance of some of their old school influences. There's a little bit kind of an eerie movement to this thing. I would say the references I came up with were like the Chasm, Immolation, and Nocturnus, but there's also their own brutal and dissonant style worked in there. But the reason that I emphasize those influences is because there is a sort of run-on phrase always happening in each one of these songs. There's a certain momentum to each one of these songs, and they all feature a ton of guitar solos. So there are plenty of layers of atmosphere here. This is probably their best out production value to date. If you're interested in something that is more has deeper layers, has plenty of atmospheric keyboards, but keeps up with plenty of riff changes. And I think that's kind of the best thing about this album, is that they really keep up with the riffs. There's always a new riff around every corner, and that it's just made it one of the better records that I've run into in a while. Maybe it's because I've been listening to the second At the Gates record a lot lately, but I feel like there's a little bit of the rough and raw, clangorous feeling there in terms of With Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness. That could be just, that could just be in the back of my head, but it does feel like this record takes on the dual guitar roles as much as it does the dual lead guitar roles in a very refined way that reminds me of, early 90s stuff that was very advanced for its time. Of course, I'm a big fan of this band already, but I think this is one of their one of the better records I've heard so far in the year. I think this is it's a rare occurrence to get something from this band, and we've waited kind of a while for this one. So not only was it heavily anticipated, but I felt like it delivered basically on every front for my own taste. I think there's a strong level of immersion within the songwriting. I think it's a very repeatable record that doesn't run on too long. Um, I had a strong connection with the style. I feel it was very enjoyable to follow just what the guitars are doing, but also the feeling of the music itself. And the themes, while it's kind of their standard idea, but the visual appeal of the album art and the presentation of it and the production values they all feel amplified and above and beyond what they've done in the past, and not only above their own standards, which are already high, but above the average for my own taste. So that's going to be a very high recommendation for me. Go ahead and check that out when it releases on February 2nd. And go ahead and read my review if you'd like more information from me.